Captain Sarah Chun gripped the controls of her battered fighter as the massive Zelkari dreadnought loomed before her like a metal mountain. The ship's hull was scarred from 3 days of running battles across the Kepler system, her fuel gauge blinking red, ammunition nearly depleted. Behind her, the evacuation transports carrying 50,000 human colonists struggled to reach the jump point. The comm crackled with Admiral Thorne's voice from the fleeing command ship. Chun, fall back immediately. That's an order. You've done enough. Sarah's jaw tightened as she watched the enemy formation. 12 dreadnoughts, each one capable of glassing a planet. Behind them, hundreds of smaller vessels spread across space like a metallic plague. The Zelkari hegemony had finally decided humanity was too dangerous to exist alongside their perfect galactic order. Negative, Admiral. Someone needs to buy you time. Damn it, Chun. One fighter against an entire armada? It's suicide. Sarah smiled grimly, remembering her grandmother's stories about Earth's last stand against a Martian invasion decades ago. Humans had always been stubborn when cornered. Maybe, but I'm not just anyone, sir. I'm human. She cut the comm and angled her ship toward the center of the enemy formation. The Zelkari had made one crucial mistake in their calculations. They understood human technology, human tactics, even human psychology to some degree. What they never grasped was human will. The lead dreadnought's weapon systems tracked her approach. Plasma beams lanced through space, each one powerful enough to vaporize her ship. Sarah dove and rolled, feeling the superheated gases wash over her hull. Her fighter's AI screamed warnings about structural stress, but she pushed harder. "Come on, you oversized turtle," she muttered, dancing between the massive ship's blind spots. "Let's see how you handle a human with nothing left to lose." The Zelkari had conquered 47 star systems through methodical planning and overwhelming force. Their admirals were bred for strategic thinking, their crews trained from birth for efficiency. They followed protocols that had never failed in 3 centuries of expansion. But protocols didn't account for a single human pilot flying straight into their formation's heart, using their own ships as cover. Sarah's fighter weaved between the dreadnoughts like a minnow among whales, too small and fast for their main weapons to track effectively. Her console lit up with target locks from smaller escort vessels. Interceptor craft peeled away from the formation, their sleek hulls gleaming in the system's pale sunlight. Sarah counted at least 30 closing on her position. "Let's dance," she whispered. The first wave came in tight formation, expecting easy prey. Sarah waited until they were almost in range, then killed her engines and flipped her ship backward. Momentum carried her forward while her nose pointed at the incoming fighters. 3 quick bursts from her pulse cannons, 3 Zelkari ships becoming expanding clouds of debris. The surviving interceptors scattered, confused by the maneuver. Their pilots had trained against human tactics, but this was something else entirely. This was improvisation born from desperation and 50 generations of human stubbornness. Sarah's fuel reserves dropped to critical levels as she accelerated again, diving toward the nearest dreadnought's engine section. The massive ship's point defense systems came alive, filling space around her with explosive shells. She felt impacts against her hull, warning lights cascading across her displays. Through the chaos, she glimpsed the evacuation convoy in the distance. The transports were still 20 minutes from jump distance. 20 minutes, she had to buy them, no matter the cost. A Zelkari commander's voice cut through the battle frequency, speaking accented but clear standard. "Human pilot, you fight well. Surrender now, and we will grant you an honorable death." Sarah laughed, the sound sharp in her cockpit. "Thanks, but I'll pass. See, you made this personal when you decided to hunt my people across half the galaxy. Now you get to learn why that was a mistake." She armed her ship's self-destruct system and aimed for the lead dreadnought's command section. If she was going down, she'd take as many of them with her as possible. But something strange happened as she committed to the attack run. Her fighter's engines, which had been running on fumes, suddenly surged with new power. The fuel gauge flickered, showing impossible readings. Her damaged weapons systems came back online. Sarah stared at the displays in amazement, then grinned fiercely. Sometimes, when pushed to the absolute limit, humans found reserves they never knew. They had Sarah's fighter screamed through space faster than it had any right to move. The engine readings defied physics, showing output levels that should have torn her ship apart. But somehow, impossibly, the hull held together as she carved through the Zelkari formation like a blade through silk. The enemy interceptors tried to match her speed and failed. Their pilots, bred for perfection and trained in every known combat scenario, found themselves outmatched by something their education had never prepared them for: pure human determination given physical form. "Impossible," came the Zelkari commander's voice over the comm. "No human technology can achieve such performance parameters." Sarah grinned as she rolled beneath a dreadnought's belly, her pulse cannons carving glowing scars across its armor plating. "You're right. This isn't technology anymore." Her targeting computer locked onto weapon emplacements as she flew, each shot precisely placed to cause maximum damage with minimal ammunition. Years of combat experience guided her hands, but something deeper drove her actions. Every human who had ever stood against impossible odds, every last stand throughout history, seemed to flow through her in this moment. The lead dreadnought's main guns swiveled to track her, but she was already gone, dancing between its escort ships. Plasma beams meant for her struck the smaller vessels instead, the Zelkari accidentally damaging their own forces in their desperation to stop her. Behind the chaos of her attack run, the evacuation convoy crept closer to jump distance. 15 minutes remaining. Sarah's ship shuddered as interceptor fire found its mark, but the damaged systems showed green across the board. Impossible, but she wasn't questioning miracles. "All ships, concentrate fire on the human," the Zelkari commander ordered. "Ignore collateral damage protocols." The space around Sarah erupted in weapons fire. Plasma beams, particle cannons, and missile swarms converged on her position from every direction. Any sane pilot would have been vaporized instantly. Sarah flew through the storm untouched, her ship moving with an almost prescient awareness of where each shot would pass. She pulled up hard, feeling gravity forces that should have crushed her. Instead, she felt energized, alive in a way she'd never experienced. Her fighter climbed above the enemy formation, giving her a clear view of the entire armada spread below. 12 dreadnoughts, 300 escort vessels, the largest military force the Zelkari had ever assembled, all focused on stopping one human pilot. "You want to see what humans can do?" Sarah spoke into the open channel. "Let me show you." She dove straight down into the center of the formation, weapons blazing. Her shots found weak points in armor plating with supernatural accuracy. Engine sections exploded, weapon systems went dark, and shield generators overloaded in chain reactions that rippled through the enemy ranks. The Zelkari had built their ships for efficiency and overwhelming firepower. They hadn't designed them to withstand a pilot who somehow knew exactly where to hit to cause maximum damage. Sarah's fighter moved like it was an extension of her will, responding to thoughts before she could form them into conscious commands. A squadron of interceptors tried to box her in from 6 directions. Sarah spun her ship in a maneuver that should have been physically impossible, slipping through gaps that existed for microseconds between their formation. Her return fire left 3 enemy ships as expanding debris clouds. Status report. The Zelkari commander's voice had lost its earlier confidence. "Sir, we've lost 47 fighters and 2 escort cruisers. The human pilot appears to be learning our attack patterns in real time." "Learning?" "She's anticipating them." Another voice cut in. "It's like she knows what we're going to do before we do it." Sarah smiled grimly. They weren't wrong. Something had changed in her perception during the battle. She could see the flow of the engagement like a vast pattern, enemy movements telegraphed seconds before they happened. Not telepathy or technology, but something uniquely human. Intuition, the ability to grasp complex patterns without conscious analysis. The gift that had let humanity survive ice ages, wars, and the journey to the stars. Now amplified beyond anything she'd ever experienced. 11 minutes until the convoy reached safety. Sarah's fuel gauge still showed impossible readings. Her weapon still fired despite being out of ammunition 10 minutes ago. The logical part of her mind knew none of this made sense. The rest of her didn't care. A new voice joined the enemy communications, older and more authoritative. Admiral Vex to all ships. I'm assuming direct command of this engagement. That human pilot has somehow tapped into something beyond our understanding. We need to adapt immediately. Sarah felt a chill despite the impossible energy flowing through her. Admiral Vex was the Zelkari's greatest military mind, the strategist who had conquered the Centauri colonies and broken the Martian defense fleets. If anyone could find a way to stop her, it would be him. All ships fall back to maximum engagement range. Create overlapping fields of fire. No more close combat. We're going to drown her in coordinated strikes. The enemy formation began to shift, dreadnoughts moving apart while smaller ships formed screening walls. Sarah watched the deployment with growing concern. Vex was taking away her advantages, forcing her into the kind of long-range engagement where numbers mattered more than skill or will. Time to change the rules again. Sarah watched the Zelkari formation spread out like a deadly flower blooming in space. Admiral Vex's tactical mind was already adapting to her impossible performance, creating killing fields that even her enhanced abilities couldn't navigate safely. 8 minutes remained before the convoy reached jump distance. Time for something completely insane. Instead of engaging the reorganized enemy fleet, Sarah turned her fighter toward the nearest asteroid field. The rocky debris from a shattered moon hung in space like a three-dimensional minefield, each chunk of stone and metal tumbling slowly in the system's gravitational dance. Where's she going? Admiral Vex's voice carried a note of confusion. Sarah dove into the asteroid field at full speed, her enhanced perception mapping safe paths through the chaotic maze of rock. Behind her, the Zelkari hesitated. Following her into the field would break up their formation and negate their numerical advantage. Sir, recommend we wait for her to emerge, came a subordinate's voice. The asteroid field provides natural barriers to coordinated fire. No, Vex's tone was sharp. She's not running. She's planning something. All ships surround the field. Deploy sensor nets. The moment she emerges, we concentrate everything on her position. Sarah smiled grimly as she listened to their communications. Vex was smart, but he was thinking like a Zelkari. Methodical, logical, predictable. Humans were none of those things when cornered. She landed her fighter on a large asteroid, using magnetic clamps to secure the ship to the rocky surface. For a moment, silence filled her cockpit as she sat surrounded by ancient stone and the vast darkness of space. The impossible energy that had sustained her still flowed through her systems, but now it felt different, more focused, more purposeful. Sarah closed her eyes and extended her awareness beyond her ship. She could feel the Zelkari fleet positioning itself around the asteroid field, their massive dreadnoughts forming an inescapable cage. Hundreds of weapons trained on every possible exit point. In the distance, the convoy crept closer to salvation, but time was running out. 6 minutes. Sarah activated her ship's mining lasers, weapons designed for asteroid prospecting that every fighter carried. The high-intensity beams began carving into the rock beneath her, following veins of metal or that her sensors had detected. Not randomly, but with surgical precision. Energy signatures detected in Grid 77, reported a Zelkari sensor operator. The human pilot is doing something to the asteroids. Elaborate. Unknown, sir. She appears to be mining. Admiral Vex was silent for a long moment. Then, understanding crept into his voice. She's not mining. She's building something. All ships, prepare to advance into the field. We cannot allow her to complete whatever she's planning. But Sarah was already finished. The mining lasers had carved a network of precisely placed cuts throughout the asteroid, weakening its structure at key stress points. She detached her fighter and moved to the next large rock, then the next. Each asteroid received the same treatment, transformed from random debris into components of a larger design. The Zelkari Advance Force entered the field cautiously, their smaller ships threading between the larger rocks while sensors swept for any sign of the human fighter. They found the modified asteroids, but couldn't understand their purpose until it was too late. Sarah emerged from behind a small planetoid, her fighter's engines at full burn. But instead of engaging the enemy's ships, she fired a single pulse cannon burst at the first asteroid she'd modified. The precise shot struck exactly where her mining lasers had weakened the stone. The asteroid exploded, but not randomly. The shaped charges Sarah had created with her mining beams directed the explosion in controlled directions, turning chunks of rock into high-velocity projectiles. Those projectiles struck the next modified asteroid, which exploded in turn, creating a chain reaction that rippled through the field. In seconds, the chaotic maze of floating rocks became a coordinated barrage of stone shrapnel. The Zelkari ships caught in the field found themselves under attack from every direction as asteroid fragments, accelerated to devastating speeds, hammered their hulls. Impossible. Admiral Vex's voice carried genuine shock. She turned the entire field into a weapon. Sarah's fighter danced through the chaos, her enhanced perception letting her navigate safely between the very projectiles she'd created. The enemy ships weren't so fortunate. Their formation dissolved as captains tried desperately to avoid the stone bombardment while maintaining defensive positions. 3 Zelkari escorts were destroyed outright, their hulls breached by basketball-sized rocks moving at orbital velocity. 2 more suffered critical damage, their engines failing as they tried to escape the deadly field. The carefully planned encirclement crumbled into chaos. All ships withdraw from the asteroid field immediately, Vex ordered. Reform at previous positions. But Sarah wasn't giving them the chance to regroup. She burst from the field like an avenging angel, her fighters' weapons finding targets among the scattered enemy ships. Without their coordinated formation, the individual vessels were vulnerable to her impossible flying and supernatural accuracy. For minutes until the convoy reached safety. The Zelkari fleet was no longer an unstoppable armada, but a collection of confused, damaged ships trying to respond to tactics they'd never encountered. Sarah pressed her attack, knowing that every second of chaos bought more time for the evacuating civilians. Admiral Vex's voice cut through the communications chatter, colder now and filled with grudging respect. Attention, all ships. We are no longer fighting a normal engagement. This human pilot has capabilities beyond our current understanding. I'm authorizing the use of quantum disruption torpedoes. Sarah felt her blood chill. Quantum torpedoes were weapons of mass destruction, capable of tearing holes in space itself. The Zelkari had never used them in ship-to-ship combat because of their unpredictable effects. If Vex was willing to deploy them now, he truly understood how dangerous she had become. Time for one final gambit. The quantum torpedo's launch signature blazed across Sarah's sensors like a miniature star being born. The weapon moved through space, trailing distortions that made reality itself seem to bend and twist. Where it passed, stars appeared to shift position, and the darkness between them took on an oily, wrong quality that hurt to look at. 3 minutes until the convoy reached jump distance. Sarah's enhanced perception screamed warnings as the torpedo locked onto her fighter. This wasn't just another weapon. It was something that could unravel the very fabric of space around her. No amount of skill or determination could dodge a blast that warped the laws of physics themselves, unless she stopped thinking like a pilot and started thinking like a human. You want to tear holes in reality? Sarah muttered, her hands dancing over controls that should have been impossible for any organic being to operate so quickly. Let's see how you handle this. Instead of running from the torpedo, she turned toward it. The massive Zelkari dreadnought that had fired the weapon loomed ahead, its hull bristling with enough firepower to sterilize a continent. Sarah aimed her fighter straight at the ship's bridge, accelerating far beyond her craft's design limits. The quantum torpedo pursued her, its reality-warping field growing stronger as it approached detonation. Space around Sarah began to stretch and contract in nauseating waves. Her instruments went wild, displaying readings that made no mathematical sense. Distance became meaningless, time started flowing backward and forward simultaneously. But through the chaos, Sarah held on to one absolute truth. She was human, and humans never gave up. The Zelkari Bridge crew watched in horror as the human fighter approached at impossible speed, a quantum torpedo close behind. Admiral Vex stood frozen at his command station, finally understanding what was about to happen. "She's not trying to escape the torpedo," he whispered. "She's using it as a weapon." Sarah pulled up at the last possible second, her fighter skimming meters above the dreadnought's hull. The quantum torpedo, locked onto her energy signature, followed her trajectory and slammed into the massive ship's primary shield generators. Reality exploded. The torpedo's detonation tore a hole in space itself, creating a localized singularity that devoured everything within a kilometer radius. The dreadnought's forward section simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but erased from reality. The remaining hull tumbled away, atmosphere streaming from the wound where physics had briefly stopped working. Sarah's fighter rode the edge of the explosion's shockwave, her ship's systems somehow adapting to conditions that should have been lethal. The impossible energy flowing through her craft protected it from forces that existed beyond normal understanding. Admiral Vex's voice crackled over the emergency frequencies transmitted from his ship's auxiliary bridge. "All remaining vessels, maintain maximum distance from the human pilot. Do not engage with quantum weapons. Repeat, quantum torpedoes are ineffective against this target." 2 minutes until the convoy reached safety. Sarah surveyed the remaining Zelkari forces. Admiral Vex's flagship was crippled, but still dangerous. 10 dreadnoughts remained operational, along with nearly 200 escort ships. Even wounded, the fleet possessed enough firepower to pursue and destroy the evacuation transports once they jumped to hyperspace. She couldn't just buy time anymore. She had to end this. The strange energy that had sustained her throughout the battle suddenly shifted, becoming something else entirely. Sarah felt her consciousness expand beyond her physical body, touching something vast and ancient that had always existed at the edge of human awareness. The collective will of her entire species, every human who had ever refused to surrender in the face of impossible odds. Her fighter began to change. The hull plating flowed like liquid metal, reshaping itself into configurations that followed known engineering principles. Weapons emerged from the craft's surface, not mechanical devices, but crystalline structures that hummed with barely contained power. The engine exhaust shifted from blue plasma to something that looked like captured starlight. "What is that thing?" came a panicked Zelkari voice over the communications. Admiral Vex stared at the transformed fighter on his tactical display. His extensive military experience recognized the signs of something beyond conventional warfare. Its evolution in real time. She's not just using technology anymore. She's become something else entirely. Sarah felt the transformation complete itself. Her fighter was still a human ship, but now it embodied something more fundamental. The refusal to yield that had carried humanity from caves to the stars, given physical form and armed with the power to reshape reality through sheer determination. She accelerated toward the remaining enemy fleet, not as a single pilot in a damaged craft, but as the living embodiment of human defiance. The Zelkari opened fire with everything they had, filling space with enough destructive energy to boil oceans. None of it touched her. The weapon's fire simply bent around her ship, deflected by fields of crystallized willpower. Sarah's return shots punched through enemy shields and armor like they were made of paper, each beam guided by an understanding of exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. 1 minute until the convoy escaped to hyperspace. The Zelkari fleet began to break apart under her assault. Dreadnoughts that had conquered star systems fled before a single transformed fighter. Escort ships abandoned their formations and jumped to hyperspace individually, their crews unable to comprehend what they were facing. Admiral Vex remained, his damaged flagship standing alone against the impossible human pilot. His voice came over the communication channel, filled with a mixture of fear and respect. Understand now, we never faced humanity's military might. We faced their technology, their tactics, their weapons. But this is something we never prepared for. This is human will made manifest. Sarah's transformed fighter hung in space before the crippled dreadnought, weapons powered but not firing. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to come from more than one throat. Remember this moment, Admiral. Remember what happens when you threaten our people. Humanity doesn't just fight to win. We fight to survive. And survival is something we're very good at. The convoy's jump signatures flared brilliant white against the star field as 50,000 human civilians disappeared into hyperspace, bound for safe harbors beyond Zelkari reach. Sarah felt each successful transition like a weight lifting from her shoulders, the desperate energy that had transformed her finally beginning to ebb. Admiral Vex's crippled flagship drifted alone in the aftermath, its escort fleet scattered or destroyed. The once mighty armada had been reduced to a single damaged ship by one human pilot who refused to accept the impossible. Sarah's fighter slowly returned to its normal configuration, the crystalline weapons dissolving back into standard pulse cannons, the flowing hull plating hardening into familiar metal. She felt herself becoming purely human again, though something had permanently changed in the process. "Admiral," she said, her voice no longer carrying those strange harmonics. "I want you to take a message back to your hegemony." Vex's response came after a long pause. "I am listening. Humanity didn't start this war. We were content to live peacefully among the stars, trading with whoever would have us, exploring new worlds, raising our children. You decided we were a threat because we wouldn't submit to your perfect galactic order." Sarah's fighter moved closer to the dreadnought, weapons powered down but ready. What you saw today wasn't special technology or secret weapons. It was something every human carries inside them. The absolute refusal to surrender when protecting what we love. Push us too far, and you'll discover that every single human is capable of what I just did. The Zelkari Admiral's voice was quiet when he replied, "I have fought in 47 campaigns across 3 star clusters. I have never encountered anything like what happened here today. Is this will truly present in all your people? Every single one of us." Sarah's smile was audible in her tone. The mother protecting her children, the farmer defending his crops, the scientist safeguarding her research. We're all carrying the same fire, Admiral. And when you threaten what matters to us, that fire becomes a force that can reshape reality itself. Sarah pulled back from the dreadnought, her fighter's engines coming online for the long journey home. "Go back to your hegemony. Tell them what you witnessed. Tell them that humanity offers peace, but we guarantee consequences for those who mistake our desire for peace as weakness." As she began to accelerate away, Vex's final transmission reached her. "Captain Shun, I want you to know that I will ensure this engagement is recorded accurately in our military archives. Your people should be proud of what you accomplished here." "They will be," Sarah replied. "And, Admiral, next time you're tempted to attack human civilians, remember that there are millions more like me scattered across the galaxy, each one willing to do exactly what I did today if you force their hand." The damaged Zelkari flagship began its own jump sequence, preparing to carry news of the defeat back to hegemony space. Sarah watched it disappear into hyperspace, then turned her fighter toward the nearest human colony world. The battle was over, but she knew the larger conflict was just beginning. Word of what happened here would spread through both human and alien space. Some species would see it as proof that humanity was too dangerous to coexist with. Others would recognize it as a demonstration of what people could accomplish when they absolutely refused to give up. 3 hours later, Sarah's fighter limped into Port Kepler's orbital station. The docking bay was packed with people who had heard fragmentary reports of the battle. Dock workers, merchants, station security, and refugees from the evacuated colonies all crowded against the observation windows to watch her ship settle onto the landing pad. Admiral Thorne was waiting as Sarah climbed down from her cockpit, his weathered face showing a mixture of relief and amazement. "Captain, I've been in the military for 35 years. I've seen heroes, miracles, and impossible victories. But what you did out there..." Sarah looked back at her battered fighter. The hull was scorched black in places, riddled with impact craters from enemy fire. By all rights, both pilot and ship should have been vaporized in the first 5 minutes of engagement with the Zelkari Armada. "I just did what any human would do, sir. I refused to let them hurt our people." Thorne shook his head slowly. "Sarah, you single-handedly defeated the largest military force the Zelkari have ever assembled. You turned physics into a weapon, convinced reality to bend to your will, and made an entire alien empire reconsider its expansion plans. That goes a bit beyond normal human stubbornness." Sarah smiled, feeling the exhaustion finally catching up with her. "Maybe, but every human has that potential inside them. We just need the right circumstances to bring it out." She looked up through the docking bay's transparent dome at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, alien civilizations were learning a new truth about humanity. They had always known humans as traders, explorers, sometimes warriors. Now, they understood that humans could be something else entirely when survival was at stake. They could be forces of nature, given conscious will and an unbreakable determination to protect what they loved. News of the battle would spread across the galaxy at light speed, carried by merchant ships, diplomatic pouches, and military communications. Some aliens would dismiss it as propaganda or exaggeration. Others would understand exactly what they were being told and adjust their policies toward human space accordingly. The Zelkari hegemony, for their part, would find themselves facing a choice. They could escalate the conflict and discover what happened when millions of humans decided their civilization was worth defending with the same intensity Sarah had shown. Or they could accept that peaceful coexistence was the only viable option when dealing with a species that could reshape reality through sheer determination. Sarah suspected she knew which choice they would make. After all, Admiral Vex had learned firsthand what human will could accomplish when pushed to its absolute limit. And across human space, people were already beginning to understand that they carried the same potential within themselves. The same refusal to surrender that had carried their ancestors from caves to the stars was still there, waiting for the moment when nothing else would be enough. The galaxy had just learned a fundamental truth about humanity. They were very, very dangerous to threaten. Captain Sarah Chun gripped the controls of her battered fighter as the massive Zelkari dreadnought loomed before her like a metal mountain. The ship's hull was scarred from 3 days of running battles across the Kepler system, her fuel gauge blinking red, ammunition nearly depleted. Behind her, the evacuation transports carrying 50,000 human colonists struggled to reach the jump point. The comm crackled with Admiral Thorne's voice from the fleeing command ship. "Chun, fall back immediately. That's an order. You've done enough." Sarah's jaw tightened as she watched the enemy formation. 12 dreadnoughts, each one capable of glassing a planet. Behind them, hundreds of smaller vessels spread across space like a metallic plague. The Zelkari hegemony had finally decided humanity was too dangerous to exist alongside their perfect galactic order. "Negative, Admiral. Someone needs to buy you time." "Damn it, Chun. One fighter against an entire armada? It's suicide." Sarah smiled grimly, remembering her grandmother's stories about Earth's last stand against the Martian invasion decades ago. Humans had always been stubborn when cornered. "Maybe, but I'm not just anyone, sir. I'm human." She cut the comm and angled her ship toward the center of the enemy formation. The Zelkari had made one crucial mistake in their calculations. They understood human technology, human tactics, even human psychology to some degree. What they never grasped was human will. The lead dreadnought's weapon systems tracked her approach. Plasma beams lanced through space, each one powerful enough to vaporize her ship. Sarah dove and rolled, feeling the superheated gases wash over her hull. Her fighter's AI screamed warnings about structural stress, but she pushed harder. "Come on, you oversized turtle," she muttered, dancing between the massive ship's blind spots. "Let's see how you handle a human with nothing left to lose." The Zelkari had conquered 47 star systems through methodical planning and overwhelming force. Their admirals were bred for strategic thinking, their crews trained from birth for efficiency. They followed protocols that had never failed in 3 centuries of expansion. But protocols didn't account for a single human pilot flying straight into their formation's heart, using their own ships as cover. Sarah's fighter weaved between the dreadnoughts like a minnow among whales, too small and fast for their main weapons to track effectively. Her console lit up with target locks from smaller escort vessels. Interceptor craft peeled away from the formation, their sleek hulls gleaming in the system's pale sunlight. Sarah counted at least 30 closing on her position. "Let's dance," she whispered. The first wave came in tight formation, expecting easy prey. Sarah waited until they were almost in range, then killed her engines and flipped her ship backward. Momentum carried her forward while her nose pointed at the incoming fighters. 3 quick bursts from her pulse cannons, 3 Zelkari ships becoming expanding clouds of debris. The surviving interceptors scattered, confused by the maneuver. Their pilots had trained against human tactics, but this was something else entirely. This was improvisation born from desperation and 50 generations of human stubbornness. Sarah's fuel reserves dropped to critical levels as she accelerated again, diving toward the nearest dreadnought's engine section. The massive ship's point defense systems came alive, filling space around her with explosive shells. She felt impacts against her hull, warning lights cascading across her displays. Through the chaos, she glimpsed the evacuation convoy in the distance. The transports were still 20 minutes from jump distance. 20 minutes, she had to buy them, no matter the cost. A Zelkari commander's voice cut through the battle frequency, speaking accented but clear standard. "Human pilot, you fight well. Surrender now, and we will grant you an honorable death." Sarah laughed, the sound sharp in her cockpit. "Thanks, but I'll pass. See, you made this personal when you decided to hunt my people across half the galaxy. Now you get to learn why that was a mistake." She armed her ship's self-destruct system and aimed for the lead dreadnought's command section. If she was going down, she'd take as many of them with her as possible. But something strange happened as she committed to the attack run. Her fighter's engines, which had been running on fumes, suddenly surged with new power. The fuel gauge flickered, showing impossible readings. Her damaged weapons systems came back online. Sarah stared at the displays in amazement, then grinned fiercely. Sometimes, when pushed to the absolute limit, humans found reserves they never knew they had.